Hey there, Jim Gavigan, Industrial Insight again. Hey, just wanted to continue on with talking about data extraction out of Pi and how do you actually start to really work with it. So I just want to continue this thought process. So what we've talked about so far is some very simple data extracts using either Pi Data Link or a custom tool of some kind where you just put everything into rows and columns, and everything has a timestamp. So you have timestamps as your first column, and then each row represents a sensor reading at a point in time. And we talked about what you can do with that. I think there's a lot you can do typically with that. But I'm going to talk next about what I think is one of the most underutilized tools in the Pi suite of products, and that is PI OLEDB Enterprise. A lot of people have used the OLEDB provider in the past to extract data using some kind of SQL query SQL techniques. But what I really find interesting is using OLEDB Enterprise. You can do those same kinds of SQL extracts using AF databases and your event frames and asset information. So again, I think this is highly underutilized, and I'm going to link below. There's how I learned this was the YouTube videos that Kurt Hertler did probably 2015, 2016 time frame, where he was talking about Excel's Power Pivot before Power BI really came on the scene. He was talking about using Power Pivot, Power View, Power Query, things of that nature that eventually ended up becoming Power BI as a tool. But he talked about these types of extracts, and then I learned a lot more over time just with some of the investigations that I was doing. So one of the first things he really talks about, and again, I'll link the videos down below. It's a playlist that I have bookmarked. But to talk about it, one of the things that we typically see in AF, being that it's a SQL database, let's say we have an event frame in Asset Framework, and you go look in the event frame window, and basically it looks like just a column of information. Here's what all my sensor readings, the summaries of all my sensor readings were. Well, what you first need to do is flip that into a data transformation and make that into a row, and then you can put a bunch of rows in place. So one of the first things you do is you go to this data T thing. So what I've done is just come down into my Asset Framework database and come down to this data T into functions, and I just right click and do new transpose functions. So there's several that you can do. What I typically do is do the dynamic transpose functions for event frames is typically what I've used, but Kurt, I think in his video, showed mostly the asset stuff, so I won't go into it at all here. But I think it's highly useful, and really, for me, this is really the predecessor to using the integrator for business analytics. If you want to start proving out some of the points on what you can do, this is where you're going to start. You don't have quite the tools to be able to shape and cleanse the data like you have in the integrator for business analytics, which I'll do next video. But I do believe this at least starts to get people thinking along those lines and really start to understand, wow, there's a whole new world of investigation that we have here that we're not even using. So what we typically do is we do a dynamic transpose event frame function, and there are several ways to do it. I don't completely understand all of them, but I'll do my best to explain what I do know. So the transpose snapshot is essentially exactly what you see in the if you go into event frames in Pi System Explorer and you do a search for event frames, you're going to get a snapshot. What was it at the end of the event frame when the event frame closed? It was my average of this, my max of that, my total of this, my count of that. So it's all the things that you've done in your event frame templates that summarize the data. So it gives you a snapshot at the end of the event frame as to what all those values were. The interpolate range, I'll skip down to the third one, is it actually allows you to say, well, I want to take that event frame and slice it up into, say, 1 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute, 1 hour, whatever it is, intervals. And I want to get an interpolated value of all of those readings that are in my event frame template. at those moments in time. So if I want to take some 1 minute averages or 1 minute values, 1 minute interpolated values of, say, the 100 things I have in my event frame template, I would use the transpose interpolate range transpose function, because then I can, set those things up, and it'll actually allow me to chunk that up where I can then do, like, say, some overlay trends. And I'll show you that here in just a second. The interpolate or the transpose archive is going to give you those archive values at certain points in time. Have not played with that or the interpolate discrete very much, so I don't have as much knowledge of exactly what those do. You may want to look in Live Library or even talk to tech support about exactly what those do, or do your own investigation. I have not found those quite as useful. I tend to use the transpose snapshot or the interpolate range. So one of the great things about that is you can actually, for these queries, if you're not real SQL savvy, which I'm not, to be honest with you, I know enough to be dangerous, but you can actually execute some predefined queries, which is what I've done here. So let me move this window back. So I've done a couple of these. So this is the snapshot value. So here we were actually doing the event frame and a pre-event frame. I think we were looking at an hour before the event actually happened to see if there might be a problem here. So you see both the event frame and the pre-event frame here, and you have the snapshots of each of those datas transposed in rows. So that way all my event frames are rows. And here, we're just the predefined ones, get you the top 100. So a lot of times what I'll do is I will add some things to this. I'll add some where clauses on, date ranges, and I try to build something dynamic on the user side where they can say, hey, I want all the events between this date and this date, because those are the ones that I'm interested in. So then that way I can build some things into this query, and I've even built this SQL query dynamic where I can go get just certain attributes that I want. So it literally builds this on the fly. This is literally going and getting everything in the event frame, but sometimes I've gone and sucked out, give me all the attributes that I've put in my event frame template and let me pick the ones that I actually want to put in this query. So there's lots you can do, especially if you're really savvy with SQL. You can use SSRS and all kinds of things. I would also highly advise you to look at the couple of different ways that you can use OLEDB Enterprise, because you can either do an OLEDB Enterprise client, or you can set up your AF server as a linked server, and that way you don't have to have OLEDB Enterprise as a client tool installed in everyone's machine. So you have to really work with your IT people to understand what benefits and negatives go with a link server, because the first two customers I brought up the link server to did this to me. They said, we're not doing that. We don't do those things. I've had several people tell me, well, why not? That's silly. But, that's really, if you're in IT, that's your call. If you're not in IT, that's a discussion that you have to have with your IT group to understand that. So again, this is the snapshot view. Gives me just kind of a view. Here's what's going on at the end of each event frame. And then the interpolate range here is this is a 1 hour, view of all of my, event frames. So let's say I want to make this the top 10 and I want to get this every 1 minute. So, whoops, didn't mean to do that. And so I can hit execute. And so what it's going to do is it's going to, look at all of those events and give me the minute by minute view of those events. So that way I can build, an event frame investigation where I can overlay, say it's multiple production runs or multiple environmental excursions. I'm looking for patterns that, aren't real hard to see. I'm not ready for a machine learning tool or something like that. I just want to have my subject matter experts be able to do some overlay trending. That's where the interpolate range really works well. Now, here's what I'll tell you. The integrator for business analytics is much, much better at doing this. But if you need to prove the point, prove the value to go buy that tool, because it does cost money, and you do have to go make the investigation like, okay, if I want to go buy this tool, what do we get out of it? Here's a great way to potentially prove the value of it, because people are going to get frustrated. Whatever you come up with using OLEDB Enterprise, feeding into Power BI or Tableau, you're probably going to get frustrated with it because it's not going to give you all the functionality you want. You're still going to have to do some data cleansing that you could do in the integrator for business analytics. You're probably going to have to add some columns like relative time and things of that nature. You're still going to have to do some things to get the data really shaped up the way you want. And OSIsoft really tried to do a good job in helping us with the extract, transform, and load functions by using this business integrator for, PI integrator for business analytics. I always call it the wrong thing. So if I say PI integrator or the BI integrator or something like that, that's what I mean. PI integrator for business analytics, which is what they officially call it. But anyway, OLEDB Enterprise, in my opinion, is one of the most underutilized tools in the tool set, and it's in the PI System Access tool set. So if you're licensed for this, great. You have it's the same thing that has the PI Web API and all those kind of things in it. The thing is, if you're not licensed for it, if just a proven investigation, you can go buy a single client license. Now, if you buy it for you, you're the only one that can use these tools. So understand their licensing metrics. Don't say, well, I'm going to go spend $500 and I'm going to, throw this report on everybody's desk, because that's not going to work in their mind, right? So talk to your account manager and understand the licensing. But if you just need to go prove a point, with something, this is a great little tool to be able to do that with. So, because especially if you know SQL, you can go grab the data, extract it with commands that you understand. You can do a link server. You can hook it up to SSRS or other tools that you use for SQL reporting and get some really good functionality out of it. I don't think it's where you're going to end up. I think you're going to find that you're going to want more, and that's when you start to get into the integrator for business analytics tool set, which I'll talk about next.